Welcome to another edition of the Heat Report by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff, coming to you a day after the Tyler Herro injury news was announced. He underwent a successful surgery on Friday afternoon for some impairment in his foot/ankle. Now, the Miami Heat did announce that they expect Herro to be out around 8 weeks, which at this point targets a November 14th potential return for Herro, but I have consistently said that I would err on the side of caution, and I would expect Tyler Herro to return in early December. If he happens to play the final couple weeks of November around Thanksgiving, awesome. That's great to have him back sooner rather than later, but I expect Herro to be back in December, and hopefully I am ultimately wrong on that. But if you want more on the Miami Heat, go follow me on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff. That's my handle. I tweet about the Miami Heat every single day, and if any news happens, like the Herro injury news, we'll have you covered on Twitter before we make a video, so go give me a follow right now. But on today's show, I actually want to look at the latest rumors following this injury because there is a lot of stuff that gets put into place after this injury. 1, who's in the starting lineup? 2, how does this impact the Miami Heat season? 3, could the Heat look to make some trades and roster moves to combat for at least a month of regular season action without Tyler Herro? Because we are a week away from training camp getting started at the end of the month, and the season truly begins on October 22nd against the Orlando Magic on the road. But there is a lot to discuss. Today's portion, and we'll probably have different videos and segments out over the next couple of days, so stay tuned, but I'm going to focus on potential trade rumors following this injury because there is a chance that the Miami Heat have a very poor season. That's just simply a fact. I think when fully healthy, this Heat team could absolutely be better than it was last season and be a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference. You think about the injuries to Boston and Jason Tatum, the Bucks losing Damian Lillard. Yes, they had Miles Turner, but that's not a good roster around Giannis. Tyrese Halliburton is out for the year with an Achilles injury for the Pacers. So you expect fallbacks from Milwaukee, Indiana, Boston, and with the Heat, they added Norman Powell, second year of Wiggins, second year of Ware, Herro again, no Jimmy Butler drama all year. Like, you had to imagine that this team possibly could be much better than it was a year ago and be inside the top 6. But with Herro being out a month, they might get off to a very slow start. I mean, I think the starting lineup is ultimately going to be on opening night, hoping there are no injuries come to the forefront again. It's going to be Davion Mitchell, Norman Powell, Andrew Wiggins, Nikola Jovic, and Bam Adebayo. Yes, I said Jovic over Ware because without Herro, you're going to need much more shooting, much more spacing, and playmaking, and Jovic provides that. Ware does not. So I believe Jovic will ultimately start. But if that's the case, there is a world where the Heat struggle and are in the play-in again. And if an injury happens to a Bam, if a re-injury happens to Herro, like a young guy gets hurt, like a Ware Jovic. Like, I'm not hoping this happens, obviously. I'm not forecasting it to happen. But if it does, this season could go from, we can be frisky to, oh my goodness, we are going to have to trade everybody away at the NBA trade deadline. And I guess I'll ask you that question. Do you think the Heat will be a playoff team or a play-in team? Or you could type other if you think they miss it altogether and are bottom 5 in the Eastern Conference. Pin comment. Let me know your thoughts. I don't think it'll go that far where they're a bottom 5 team in the East. Just too good of coaching and too good of players. Listen, we were abysmal last season, and we still were able to find ourselves inside the top 10 of the Eastern Conference, and then win the play-in and make the playoffs and get embarrassed by the Cleveland Cavaliers. But the point of this video is to talk about Andrew Wiggins and Norman Powell, because Powell is on a 1-year, $20 million deal after being acquired in that 3-team trade with the Jazz and Clippers, and Andrew Wiggins has 1 year guaranteed left in Miami because he has a player option for next season at $30.1 million. Now, I do expect Andrew Wiggins to opt into that deal if he is with Miami, but hey, it's 1 year guarantee that left on his deal. The one interesting part of this injury for Herro is that with him out for a month plus of the season potentially, we could see the Heat really lean into those 2 veterans. Run the offense through Andrew Wiggins, which I know it didn't work well last season, but they're going to have to do it again. They can run it through Wiggins. They can run it through Norman Powell. Why is this a good thing for Miami? Well, if the Heat deem that even with Herro returning, those players that they added aren't good enough to get Miami over the hump in terms of being a playoff team consistently or winning in the Eastern Conference, well, you could pump up the trade value of both Wiggins and Norman Powell to then flip them at the trade deadline to a contending team for future young assets or NBA draft capital. And the more likely scenario here is that you do that with Powell since he's got an expiring contract going on. But you have to imagine that Powell's raw production and stats, as well as Andrew Wiggins, will be elevated without Tyler Herro in the lineup. Herro averaging 23.8 points per game last year, a first-time All-Star, shooting 38% from three, 48% from the field. Like, that is a lot of production that is going to have to be made up for in the aggregate. And I do believe the Heat are going to lean on Powell and Wiggins to soak up most of that production, if not all of it, with jumped up roles of a Davion Mitchell, a Bam maybe more aggressive on offense, Nikola Jovic, Kel'el Ware, but most of it will be Wiggins and Norman Powell. More coming here in a second, but hit that sub button for daily Heat content. We got you covered with everything you need to know. But more into this. Think about it. The Heat acquired Norman Powell for nothing. Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson. Two guys that were going to be at the bottom of this Heat roster regardless. So you get an asset in Powell that will only help you win games and be an offensive creator, but also you can turn this into a first-round pick. You really could. You could also turn it into like 4 second-round picks. That's very possible too. Would I prefer a first-round selection? Oh, absolutely. But say a contending team, honestly, I'll throw the Milwaukee Bucks out there. This is a Bucks team which doesn't have a lot of future draft capital, but they have to do everything in their power to remain competitive and contend in the Eastern Conference to keep Giannis Antetokounmpo happy so he doesn't request a trade. Well, they don't have a good backcourt scoring punch. They have Kuzma, Giannis, and Miles Turner. I'm not sold by that. If they overachieve in the first half of the season and Giannis is like, hey, we need another scorer, we need another shooter on the perimeter, well, then they could maybe contact the Heat if they're struggling because of the injuries and send a first-round pick in the future for Norman Powell. And you get expiring salary to just remain flexible in the summer, but also get a future draft pick. That's something that Pat Riley absolutely needs to be ready to do. And if they don't, if this team goes nowhere and they just hold on to Powell, they hold on to Wiggins, let their contracts run out when they ultimately do, and don't get any assets back, it would be more front office malpractice. And we've already seen a lot of it from the Heat. I mean, I will never get over that Haywood Highsmith trade. It was such a bad deal. I get it. You got underneath the luxury tax, but you attached a second-round pick to get rid of Haywood Highsmith. I will almost guarantee, and y'all can remember this, and y'all can take bets if you want. I bet the Nets end up trading him at the trade deadline, and they get one or they get multiple second-round picks from a contending team for Haywood Highsmith, who is on a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. It's a cheap contract, a good 3-and-D player off the bench, and the Heat had to attach a draft pick to get rid of him. That is ridiculous. But that's the type of stuff that Pat Riley does that drives me absolutely wild. It kills me. It does. So we know that Norman Powell could generate interest, and it would make sense to trade him if the Heat are struggling. The same thing could be said for Andrew Wiggins, who has been at the forefront of Heat trade rumors all offseason anyway, specifically with the Los Angeles Lakers. And I still think the Lakers will remain interested in Wiggins throughout the season because they are on a time crunch just like the Bucks are, as an example. LeBron James is likely entering his final year of his NBA career. Sad to say, but it's probably true. And if that's the case, and the Lakers are a top 3 team in the West, Luka's cooking, Reeves is cooking, LeBron's cooking, DeAndre Ayton was a good signing in the offseason. Well, why wouldn't they address their most glaring need at that 3 spot in their starting lineup? And I know they are not willing to trade Connect, expirings, and a first-round pick right now for Andrew Wiggins. That it's likely just Connect and expirings. But if Miami's struggling, they bump up Wiggins' trade value because he's actually playing well as the third option without Tyler Herro in the lineup for a month plus. Well, then a team like Los Angeles does get desperate, and they ultimately offer you a package that looks like Connect, unprotected 2031 first-round pick, and Rui Hachimura's expiring money. Well, then Miami would probably have to take that. And if they didn't, well, I'll go back to it, front office malpractice. Like, I think that is a bad move for Miami if they ultimately turn these type of things down. So there is a lot of moving parts for Miami after the Herro trade. We'll dive more into who should be the starting lineup in a couple of videos. We'll dive maybe into how this implicates the Heat season in terms of going tank mode and ultimately looking towards the draft. We have other stuff to get to as well, but I wanted to have this video focus on potential trade rumors with Andrew Wiggins and Norman Powell, two veterans that aren't going to be long for Miami in all likelihood, and how this could actually push them to be traded sooner rather than later, but also help Miami in terms of draft capital they receive, because like I said, Powell and Wiggins' production might go up with Herro out, which could also ultimately allow Miami to get more draft capital in return. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Appreciate everybody who watched out the entire show. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you go follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you with another video coming soon. Go Heat.